Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to InnerViews, the podcast where we dive deep into the realms of therapy, healing, and intentional living. I'm your guide on this adventure, Ivory. Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey with me? Whether you're navigating the complexities of trauma, embracing intentional parenting, or seeking self-help strategies, this podcast is your sanctuary. InnerViews is not just a podcast, it's a community. A safe space where stories unfold and healing takes center stage. Your story matters. And here, courageous storytelling is the heartbeat of our existence. We'll be exploring powerful themes like healing, navigating the intricacies of foster care, the strength found in survival, the beauty of reclamation, and the pure bliss of joy. So if you're ready to join hands with a community that understands, subscribe now. Let's walk this path together because the journey toward understanding and well-being starts right here, right now. Welcome to InnerViews, where every step is a celebration of your resilience and a testament to the incredible strength within you. Let's make this journey unforgettable. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of InnerViews. As we wrap this season of InnerViews, I wanted to share a different kind of conversation, one rooted in spirituality, healing, and hope. This year stretched me in every direction, becoming a mom through kinship, foster care, and adoption, buying my first home, trying to date and find balance again, and navigating my BRCA2 positive diagnosis while preparing for preventative surgeries that will literally reshape my body and my life. Through it all, I've leaned deeply into faith. Not religion, but my personal spiritual walk. I respect all religions, denominations, and belief systems. I simply felt called to share where I am right now, spiritually, especially during this season when so many of us are reflecting on what's real and what's next. Today, I'm joined by someone who has been a steady motherly presence and spiritual guide in my life, Mrs. Lorna J. Hines. Her book and her spiritual teachings have been a light for so many, and for me personally. She has been a reminder that love, healing, and faith can coexist with struggle. Together, we're going to talk about family, faith, and the future, and what it truly means to become the woman you're destined to be. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
This is an honor and a privilege. I'm super excited. The listeners can't see why I smile, but I feel like this has been a long time in the making. I mean, we converse all the time, but you haven't been on my podcast yet. So I'm excited for this opportunity. This is not going to be the last time that you're here. And I'm just really, really grateful for this conversation. And I want to let the listeners know, before I ask you to introduce yourself to them, we were first introduced, I believe it was in 2019, because I was in Nigeria, if I'm not mistaken, when I found your Facebook group, Mediums of African Ancestry, and you made me go through all these steps to join it. I had to answer a bunch of questions and I had to talk to you. And my Wi-Fi wasn't reliable because I was in the middle of Nigeria. And I remember that. So I really
apologize. I don't even remember.
I do. There was a lot going on that summer, but I remember distinctly conversing with you with sketchy Wi-Fi and you finally accepting me into the group because I was just searching for a deeper meaning and understanding of my experiences and spirituality and stuff. So we're going on, I guess, 6 years now. It hasn't felt like that.
Seems like forever.
Yeah, it hasn't felt like that at all. But that means, that's what they say when you find your spiritual family. So can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are, give us your book title, and then we'll jump into our questions for today.
Okay. Yes, I'm Lorna J. Hines, also Mrs., as Ivory mentioned. And I'm also an ordained spiritualist minister. I was ordained in 2022. So I'm also Reverend Lorna J. Hines. And I recently published a book that was in the making for many, many years entitled Straight Talk from a Wise Woman, Trauma, Tears, and a Healing Path. And it really is, I think, a culmination of many of my experiences of my family life, my personal experiences of trauma, as well as the experiences of many of the people that I was honored to serve over a very long career in mental health and substance abuse. And then, of course, a wider understanding of the various isms that impact our lives that also have a tremendous traumatic impact on our body, mind, and spirit. And then, because I'm a baby boomer, we believe that you can't be part of the problem if you don't offer a solution. And I'll put that solution in quotes. So there is a significant part of the book that focuses on healing and the extent to which there are ways in which we can heal ourselves, introduce healing within our daily life practices, and ways in which other paths, healing paths, are available to us if we so choose. But besides that, as I mentioned, I have a extensive background, more than 40 years in mental health and substance abuse. In fact, so interesting, Ivory. I started out my career early in foster care and running a group home for young adolescent women that had been part of a very large building and place in New York City. So we're talking now around 1978.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hopefully some of this stuff is written down somewhere. But there was an infamous place run by the city of New York called Children's Center.
Mm.
And any child that had adolescent that had challenges with their families and being unable to live with their families or having some they used to call pins, PINS, and that was I'm really giving you the history here, a person in need of supervision. I don't know if they still have that, but the problem with that particular program, and I'll put that in quotes, is it just threw children and adolescents with all sorts of different problems. Those that had major mental health or emotional problems,
Mm-hmm.
those that just needed a place to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it just was not a good place. But somebody had wisdom and they decided to close it down. So they established contracts with a variety of agencies, one of which that I was involved with called Edwin Gould Services for Children. And so I ran a group home for these youngsters. Now, of course, the issue had to be that because the Children's Center had all sorts of different girls with different problems. It was the same thing in the group home. And it was a tremendously difficult and challenging position for me. But I hung in there for a while and then went on to continue working in mental health and substance abuse. That's the short story.
I did not know that about you. I mean, I've known your background in mental health and substance and all that other kind of stuff, but I did not know that. That's just another example, I think, of like the synergy and the spiritual connection between us. I really am just really grateful because I think that we have so much in common and I learned so much from you from a different perspective. Even I think it was a few years in before I even knew that you adopted Michael. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I don't even, I think I learned that maybe before I became an adoptive mother, but this the synergy is really there and really crazy. But thank you for sharing. And unfortunately, in New York, things have shifted, but that still happens in child welfare all across our country. Kids of different needs, youth and adolescents of different needs, all being thrown into specifically group placements. And so that's not something that's necessarily changed over the last 40 years. It's just shifted. There has become more, how would you say, specialization within providers, but there's still a lot of instances where you'll have children who are simply needing a home and shelter placed with children who have or a youth who have incredible mental and emotional needs. And so, unfortunately, that's why we're still doing this advocacy work. And that's what brought us partially to this conversation today. So, our first segment of questions is going to talk about my year of becoming. And I'm smiling because I feel like ever since I've known you, I've just been in this rapid period of transition. Like, when is it going to stop? Goodness gracious. So this year has been full of transitions, tests, and transformations. And also just thank you for bearing with me because I probably seem so angsty all the
Not at all. Not at
so
all.
anxious. There's always something going on.
At all.
And you've been able to witness my journey this year, adoption, home ownership, health decisions, and all. From your lens as a spiritualist and as someone who's walked through deep transformation, what do you see happening on a soul level when life seems to change all at once?
I think that's an excellent question. And I'm thinking about the extent to which it reflects aspects of my own life and the various transitions that I've made. And some would say that I kind of sort of bounced around in different careers and different types of paths. And I think all of that was part of my soul's expression and what I needed to go through and how I needed to impact and express important aspects of myself and my soul, but also the extent to which I was utilized to impact the the spirit and the souls of others. So I I often felt that there was so many things happening to me at once. So I can certainly align myself with those with you perhaps and those in your audience that felt like everything was happening at once. And as I recall different aspects of my life, I remember fellow workers that I had the opportunity to work with when I would explain certain things that would happening in my life at any given time, they would often say, "Oh my God, you have so many things happening to you at once. How do you manage it?" And I can now, I suppose, look back and say, yes, there were so many things happening at once, but perhaps because I'm so much of a doer, so much of a person that was equipped with how to manage, it began to feel like this is going to be my life, and I have to find some way to manage it and to do everything that needed to be done. There was a time, and I mentioned this in my book, and it's not an example of self-caring, but there was a time that I was working full time in a psychiatric center in charge of all of the residential services. So we're talking about being responsible for the management, the clinical aspects, the administrative aspects, all aspects of a very large number of clients in a psychiatric center. And this was one of the major psychiatric centers in New York State. And so I was doing that full time. I had, of course, children. I was a wife, and I was also teaching. And I was teaching two sections of a particular course, ethnocultural issues in social work practice. That was the name of the course. And that has been looking at ethnicity, culture, and so forth, has been a major subject area that I've been involved with. But anyway, to make a long story short, this was in the summertime, and I was leaving my job, full time job, and then going to teach. And I was coughing. I had an awful, awful cough and congestion, but I knew I had to, get in there and teach the two sections of the class. And so one of the nurses who was one of my staff, one of the people that I was responsible for supervising was this, old fashioned kind of Irish nurse who had a tremendous experience. And she said, she heard me coughing and she came close to me and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I got to leave because my students are waiting for me." She said, "You're sick and I think you have pneumonia and you're not going to teach. You're going straight home and you're going to the emergency room because you have pneumonia." And I said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." And of course, I left and I went on to teach.
Oh my goodness.
So, so I taught the two sections and then I went home and then I did go and get medical care. But as I said, this is an example of not being self-caring, but also having to multitask and having to manage so many different things. I'm sure that when I got home from teaching, I had to make sure the kids had dinner, that
Oh,
they did their homework, that they had their clothes out for the next day. Although what I would do for clothing is on Sunday. Sunday was a big day for me. The Christians call it the day of rest. It was
mhm.
never a day of
Not restful, preparing for the week. Yeah.
preparing for the week, but getting them to church because I believed in their religious education. But my Sunday was spent cooking a number of meals. I'd have something in the oven, something in the crock pot, something on top of the stove. So at least three major dinners. And then I would fold the clothes for the kids to wear the whole week.
Yeah, and prepare in advance. I try to do that with Jaden too.
I got you. And then because they were girls, I had to make sure I did their hair
Yes.
so that the hair would be done for the week.
Oh, so much
So,
work.
yeah. So, what I'm trying to say is, and I'm leaving out other familial stuff because I was part of an extended family.
Right.
My father suffered from alcoholism, and I
Mm,
was often called into helping him and taking care of him, taking him to different rehab places. My mother, often needed help. My sister, who has passed at 35, suffered from bipolar disorder, and I often had to be called upon to help her. So
mhm,
that was in that mix of the story that I just told you, leaving full-time work, going to teach. And I just looking back on it, I just managed somehow.
mhm.
And when people said to me at work, "Oh my God, so much is going on with you. How do you manage?" And I just surrendered to it and I tried to manage the best I could. Now, looking back, I did not do a good job of taking care of myself
Mm,
and
mm.
figuring out when it was time to really just focus on self care. I feel as though I'm doing a little better of a job now, but I would say I still need some work in that arena.
I think it's so interesting that that comes up because I feel like I've been prompted often by you to do that at this stage. And so in a lot of ways I'm getting to learn like from the things that you experience at this point. And I agree with you. I feel like I just have to surrender. Like, this is just what it is. And some people just have a lot of callings and responsibilities. I like to say, to whom much is given, much is required. And I think, when you've been given a lot of gifts, a lot of spiritual gifts, particularly, which is one of the biggest reasons why we've even come together and met, that's just the fact of life. You're going to have a lot of people, you're going to have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of roles, and surrendering to that and also allowing people to help you, which can be very, very hard. And at the same time, which can also often feel counterintuitive, but resting and taking care of yourself, I think is all a part of being able to ride those waves, if you will. You kind of already gone through several of my questions, but I guess I'll just explicitly ask to. And this is a woo-woo episode. So for those of you who don't believe in spirituality, you can depart now. Thank you for tuning in. Come back next year, next season. But we're going to talk about some spiritual aspects. Specifically, you do identify as someone who has psychic mediumship abilities. I am also learning about those gifts and other things amongst those subjects. So, can you tell our audience how can people invite spirit into seasons that don't seem to make sense, but that can also be a part of that surrendering, allowing spirit to take over and be supportive?
I think that's an excellent question. And what I would suggest are a couple of things. First, to the extent that you can, identify or align yourself with the higher power or to whom you think or to whom's you think. I'm sure that's not a word, but I just made it up.
It works, so we understand.
This sense you have that there is something that is a spirit or a person or persons or whatever the case may be that came before you, that is in some respects responsible and a significant part of your life to help you on the path of success and satisfaction. I really totally believe that. But very often, when we are so involved in doing, that we don't necessarily give ourselves the opportunity to listen and to feel what we are being told, what is being shared with us. Now, for me, even though I was doing all these things, and by the way, I was also a healer in my church, and I did hands on healing at this time.
What didn't you do?
Yes, I did. I did. Sometimes not too well. But I was feeling that there was something missing. There was something missing. And I was feeling and I felt in retrospect that I was being told that this was a time for me to, yes, take care of all of the different things that I needed to take care of, but that there was something more that was there for me. And to that extent, as I said, I was doing the healing in the church, but after a while, some of the parishioners didn't want the lay people, such as myself, doing the healing. What can I tell you? And so they only wanted the pastor to do it. So that left. But I spent some time, I gave myself time in that search and trying out different things and also, as I said, listening, because I happened to be listening to the radio sometime during my long treks to work. By the way, I also had long mileage to the places I worked, but I tried to use the time positively. And I heard on a radio program this man talking about numerology, right? And somehow he must have given his name and address or whatever, because I contacted him and joined his class. And he told me at that point that you need to be in this class. You need to be part of this community. And so for quite a while, I studied numerology, and I also shared it with others, and I continued being involved with the group and with numerology. But while I was studying it with him, a member of the group talked to me about a radio program that was featured on a computer, and that I should go listen to this woman that was on this radio program on a computer. And I can't tell you why I followed up on this as opposed to anything else, other than the extent to which I felt as though this was something I should do, which is why I encourage people to listen to what is being communicated to them from within themselves. We don't often do it, or we listen to things that we think we ought to do, like, oh boy, that's a nice looking piece of chocolate cake here, go eat.
Oh no. It makes me think there. I don't know if I've shared this with you, but in the last few years, I came across something that has been really helpful. I remind myself of it often. It said something along the lines of like the voice of God is quiet and calm, and the voice of anxiety is hasty and anxious, and it's loud and it's obnoxious. And so, like listening to those, tuning yourself in to be able to decipher between a higher power and your earthly anxieties is a really, really important skill too. And I wanted to bring up, I think that when we talk about surviving 17 years of being in foster care, I think that I have the framework now to understand how I was able to do it. And one of the ways is because I really feel like my departed ancestors were guiding me so much along the way. I mean, as a child, how did I know how to clean clothes and hang them up to dry so that I could have clean clothes for school? How did I know what to cook and how to cook it? My mom, she taught me some things, but she wasn't able to really mother me fully. And I really think that my ancestors were there quietly guiding me along the way, like, hey, do this. Hey, school is important. Hey, listen to this. Hey, pay attention to that. And so I think that that's one of the untalked about aspects of my own personal resilience is that deep spiritual connection. And you mentioned the church too. I was in the church like crazy when I was a teenager. I was always in the church. I was a minister, leader of dance, of song. I was leading the youth. I was doing it for free.
Your support.
People getting paid to do it. That's neither here nor there. And the church is a very controversial place, especially the Black church, for many reasons. I don't think the church does a great job of adequately preparing Black women specifically for life. And definitely in terms of their own worth or preparing them for dating or for marriage, it's very patriarchal and misogynistic, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. And we've normalized that. And that's really harmful, I think, to our community. But that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But yeah, just I kind of wanted to bring that up and bring the connection back to like how and why this would be relevant to people who have lived child welfare experience. Because even when you feel like you have nothing and no one, you always have that internal sense of voice, and you always have the ability to learn to tap into a higher power outside of yourself, and that can help you in the darkest of times. And if you don't, you can tap into community members like us who do, and who can help you and who can mold you and who can guide you and support you. And I think that's really, really beautiful.
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. I would say, though, on the other hand, with respect to the church, it's probably, and churches, let's put it that
Yeah.
way, because
Yeah.
I don't think that this is your observations are focused on one particular denomination. Although I would imagine there's some denominations where these numerous problems that you mentioned are more evident than others. But
Sure. Yeah.
nonetheless, what I would suggest perhaps to some of your listeners is the fact that change can come from within, and that certainly you and myself and perhaps some of the other people that are listening to this may not see themselves as change agents, but they certainly can do by questioning some of the proven practices and things that go on in churches. Now, I grew up in the Episcopalian faith, which some call Anglican, and you won't believe this, but when I was growing up, women were not priests.
Oh,
Uh,
believe it.
the priest was kind of it. Women had other roles, like the director of the junior choir that I was a part of, and the organist was a woman, and she was wonderful. She was wonderful, Mrs. Gomez. But that changed, obviously. I don't know if women were deacons, but that's something I might even look at some point. But women did not have those types of roles. Also, young girls as myself, we couldn't be altar boys. It was all
Hmm.
meaning in the Episcopalian faith, there's the priest, of course, that's kind of running things during the service,
Mhm.
but the priest would have all sorts of helpers that would do different things.
Right.
Like, for example, hold the
Yeah.
crucifix.
Hmm.
When you're marching in the church and when you're leaving, or when they're doing the gospel. But at that time, girls were not altar boys. But that changed over time. And now,
Hmm.
at least in my faith, it, priests, there are women priests, there are women deacons, there are women
Hmm.
altar people. There, in fact, at one point, I was a lay, a Eucharistic minister in that faith. So you see, there's always been this searching, this searching, this search.
Yeah. I resonate deeply with that because who I am now, people would probably be so shocked. When I was at the height of my Baptist leadership, I was so pious. I was so intense. I was so uptight. I didn't curse. I didn't do sinful things intentionally. And now I just feel like such a sinner. But I also feel so free. And I feel I have access to redemption. That's the difference. I feel like I have more of a realistic relationship with God than I did back then. It felt so punitive. It felt so one-sided, if you will. It didn't feel like a reciprocal relationship, in that like this higher being saw all of me and accepted all of me. It felt like I had to be a certain kind of way or be condemned to hell. And I didn't like that dichotomy, that belief system or anything. And as I raise a child now without a husband, that's a big difference in our story with these ages. You had a husband and I don't.
That's coming. That's
I'm
coming.
neither here nor there though, because I could have had a lot of husbands. I had a fiance, but I needed to be the right person, the right partner. I do feel that
Yes.
my future husband is not only going to be an act of fulfillment of love towards me, but he's going to be someone who I engage in my higher purposes and callings alongside, and who's going to be a really big support
Okay.
system in not only like my personal life, but my professional life. So I can't just be marrying anyone. Like this person has to be equipped and aligned, and he has to be a strong individual to be able to deal with all of that too. But I sometimes wonder, I'm like, should I just take Jaden to a Baptist church? Because I think part of like blackness is kind of having that churchy experience and that access to that culture. There's a entire culture within it that's quite enjoyable, if I might add. I mean, aside from all the other problematic stuff, it's fun. The black church is fun. The music is amazing and transformational, and it just takes you to another space. Talk about elements of like, how would you say, meditation and like spiritualism. It's all in the church, whether or not people want to acknowledge it. I mean, even just the fact of communion, that's a very witchy kind of thing. If you really like, you're drinking the blood of Christ, you're eating his body. Like that
Yes.
sounds like a sacrifice to me, but that's neither here nor there. And I can talk to you forever too about this kind of
That's fine. But what you might think about is, there's so many Baptists, Methodists, the Lutherans do a lot of focus on child development and child
stuff.
learning. Lutherans do. And of course, spiritualists, Baha'i. I don't know what's available in your town, but we have a Baha'i center here where I live, and they have a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful focus on developing children. Even
Mhm.
one of the physicians that I go to is a Baha'i member.
Mhm.
So I think there are a lot of choices, and I think you can figure out what between yourself and him,
Mhm.
what works, what is calling. I think religious education is very, very important for children, and it's a source of community. It's a source of love and support outside of the family. You know,
Yeah, I
can be
agree.
infinite. Can be so infinite.
Yeah, and he has when he goes and spend times with his great grandmothers, like they'd often take him to church and stuff too. So he's surrounded by a lot of different options and cultures and communities, and he himself is of a different culture than me. He's Hawaiian in ancestry, and so he came all the way over from the Pacific Ocean just to claim me as his mom. But I need to get into our next segment because we still have a whole bunch of questions left. But this is a good transition. So we're talking about the mother within, kinship, adoption, and spiritual motherhood. Both of us has walked through non-traditional paths to motherhood. You through adoption. I'm about to formalize the adoption in a few weeks. What spiritual lessons has motherhood taught you about love and legacy?
Mm, another excellent question. Well, if I may start this way, not that I'm starting in a negative way, but I very much wanted to utilize the things that I was taught by my mother, and also I was raised in part by my maternal grandmother. But I wanted to utilize the things that I thought were helpful and purposeful and loving and supportive, but not at all utilize the things that I thought were not helpful, not purposeful, not loving and supportive. Now, you must consider that, childhood punishment was something very much part of my life. Although my mother and family members didn't realize that if they really wanted to punish me or affect my behavior and my thoughts about things, that the best way to have done it was to talk to me. Okay,
Please
that
elaborate.
beatings were the
Oh, okay.
best way.
Yeah,
But you
sure.
see, my mother thought she was doing much better with beatings than her own mother, who was quite abusive. I mean,
Right.
well, both of them were abusive. But my mother said that her mother often would throw things at them
Mm.
or, call them awful names. In part, I mean, at 36, she was left with 5 or 6 children to raise
Oh,
herself because her husband passed, although he unfortunately had outside interests and wasn't necessarily even at home helping. But she had to figure out a way, talking about transition, to figure out how she could care for her children. Now,
mhm,
out of whether it was out of frustration or maybe her own experience with her mother, I'm talking my grandmother's mother, uh,
right.
her form of corporal punishment was very, very harsh towards my mother and her siblings. Now, my mother, who felt that she was doing a better job, only used the strap or strap
Mm,
to me, but it was still, some would say, abusive.
right. I don't believe in beating children. I didn't experience, surprisingly, of all the things I've experienced, I didn't get beat as a child. I remember my mom chased me one time with a hanger. And I remember I said something and did something, and my grandmother slapped me. But those are the only instances of when like anyone ever laid hands on me or threatened me. So I kind of got to go through childhood without that experience. And I do believe in gentle parenting. Jaden is not a gentle child. So it's been difficult, but I do find that I can talk to him, and he is just in a really interesting phase of toddlerhood where he's incredibly rebellious right now, and he's also very strong. Yesterday his pediatrician said that he moves and navigates the world like a 4-year-old. He's only 2.
Wow.
Only 2. He just turned 2. And so, that's what I'm dealing with now. But I'm also having to undo a lot of trauma that I'm aware of and some that I'm not aware of with him. But I think there's a few things I want to highlight for our audience. I think that we have to decolonize parenting when we are people of color in particular, because you mentioned generations that probably started in the 1800s. You went back several generations. So we're talking about your grandparents, parents, and such. So I'm assuming they were probably born in the 1800s. And
Right.
that's very close to when American slavery was just ending. And that was very informative of how we approached parenting from a chattel slavery perspective. And we know that violence of all forms was an integral part of keeping slaves in compliance with that entire way of life. And unfortunately, I think that's something that's traveled and migrated throughout Black culture in America. And not even just Blackness, but I'm only Black. So we're going to talk about that perspective right now. And I think that's something that we need to pay attention to. But then the idea of also decolonizing spirituality is something that I wanted to bring up too. And like just being really curious, like you said before, of why do we do the things that we do? And how might we firstly understand the history of it, and secondly decide to do things differently. I remember my grandmother telling me, she was born in 1927, about how her father used to throw her underneath a stove. And I'm just like, my mind is blown, because first of all, what stove is big enough for a body to fit underneath it? Like that's the first thing. I always try to picture it, and I picture some like cast iron giant thing in a house. But also she was probably really small. She was probably a child. And yeah, they can fit in spaces that adult bodies might not be able to fit into. And I think that probably shaped her decision to not get married. She chose to have 5 children out of wedlock and not get married because she didn't want to take care of men, and she probably didn't want to subject herself to their violence. And that was really radical back in the day when you needed a man to have a bank account and you needed a man to do a lot of things that you couldn't do on your own. And so let's just consider being more curious and more decolonizing of our belief systems and understanding the history of how they came to be, and then making a conscious decision as to how we want to be different. But I hope I haven't gotten us off track too much.
Not at all. I think we also need to figure out what is it that we want to imbue our children with?
Mm,
What is it that we're trying to put forth in their development in terms of their value, in terms of the vision they have of themselves and
right,
what they would become and should become. And I think if we're very clear about those particular themes, then the punishment, for lack of a better term, should impact in some way, or should be a part
right,
of that thinking. And that, especially with anger, for example, my mother would get angry at hearing me being fresh, or what they saw as fresh,
You were being fresh.
and rude or showing anger. But
Yeah,
she would get angry. And then once you are angry as a parent and you're beating this child out of anger, what is it you're teaching? What is
that's
you're trying
right.
to imbue them with?
Yeah,
So I think it's important to just take a moment. And by the way, if I say this, I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings that might be listening, but make a conscious decision when you're ready to be a parent and what that is involved.
yeah,
Because I think we often have a sense that all of the skills and experience and knowledge that we need as parents will just magically appear when the child is with us,
no,
or please, or we have we make the decision to have a child for many of the wrong reasons.
yes,
you know i want
yeah,
i want to keep this relationship, or I want this
mm-hmm,
relationship to continue, so the
mm-hmm,
way I'm going to do that is to have a baby, or I need someone to love me, so I'm
mm-hmm,
going to have a baby. Because
mm-hmm.
when you're up 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and this is maybe the fifth time you've been up,
Oh, please, you're
uh,
triggering me.
you're not feeling the love.
No, you're not feeling the love. Jaden should be sleeping through the night at this age. He does not sleep through the night. And I'm up every night, several times a night. And I have gone from getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep before I had him to getting 5 hours of sleep on a good day. And I am incredibly exhausted. And it's something you shared. I just want to highlight for the audience. I am mourning what I thought motherhood would be. I thought that I would fall in love. I thought that I would get married. I thought that I would make love to my husband. We'd get pregnant. I would feel the magic of growing this baby because, I'm a doula. So, like, appreciating all the aspects of the physicality of birth and labor and delivery, but also your body prepares you to be a mother physically. It wakes you up in the middle of the night in preparation for being up in the nighttime. It gives you all these hormones that kind of assist in you being able to show up in a specific kind of way for your child. And also, when you have a biological child, you have somewhat of a blueprint and a roadmap as to what they might need or to how to soothe them or how to help them or how to understand them. But when you're an adoptive parent, when you are a kinship adoptive parent, meaning you don't expect this, like I didn't go seeking out a baby sought me. When you show up in that regard, you have to shift everything. I never anticipated being a single mom. I never anticipated being the only person to get up in the middle of the night. I never anticipated being the only person to share the joy. I was last week. I was bathing him and he smells so good. Oh my God, my baby smells so good. I wish you could smell him, Miss Lorna. But I was bathing him and I was tickling him and he's laughing and he has the most infectious laughter. And I was like, oh my God, why am I the only one who gets to experience this? It feels criminal that like I'm the only one who gets to experience, and it's beautiful. But I don't think that motherhood is ever supposed to happen in isolation like this. I do think that it's supposed to be two people coming together to raise a child, and then a village behind those people, meaning the mother, for lack of a better words, because this is an LGBTQIA2S plus friendly space. But, parent one has their own village, parent two has their own village, and we're coming together to make an even bigger village around this beautiful child. And it just felt so strange to not have that. And as someone who experienced foster care, I had these dreams about how I was going to build my family in a specific kind of way. And for it to not pan out like that, it's sad. It is really, really sad. On top of the exhaustion, on top of the stresses, it's just a lot. But I think, for lack of a better terms, and to be somewhat churchy, mothering is a ministry, and it doesn't always happen in the ways that we anticipate it happening. But it doesn't mean that we're not equipped or prepared or supported to do it in whatever ways that we've been called to do it. So I just want to highlight that. I do have a quick question before we move on to our next segment.
But could I just throw something in?
Please.
Because I want I want you to know that though you may feel in some respects that your experience with being an adoptive mother in some respects is an aberration of what was in your mind was going to happen, it may not be. In my case, I thought I was done with children. In
Mhm.
fact, my gynecologist obstetrician instructed myself and husband to be sure about not having another child because it would have killed me.
Mm,
Unfortunately, I went through two experiences of preeclampsia,
I'm sorry.
both. So when Michael came along, it was for us an aberration because we weren't expecting anymore.
Yeah, and he's the
And
only.
he's the only boy, and we were totally out of mm, the skill and the techniques and so forth of
Yeah,
what it was like because he came to us at a couple of months.
yeah.
What I want to say is you may be more of a maybe there's a group or something that you could create where you could talk to other women that are in similar circumstances, because more and more what I'm seeing of especially Black, Indigenous, people of color women, they are making decision because for whatever reason there isn't a man in their life. They're making a decision to adopt or to have a child on their own. So I think the template for motherhood is rapidly changing, and you may be more of a standard than you think. You just haven't come in contact with the others that are going through the same thing.
Well, I'm anticipating that happening. I feel like spirit is guiding me to be more visible online. So perhaps that community is about to blossom and bloom. And that's actually a great segue to my next question because, I've had this conversation with you about being BRCA2 positive and how they want me to get my ovaries removed and get a double mastectomy in like 5 years, which is crazy because like that in theory means that I have to have all of my biological children in the next 5 years. And each birth itself is 42 weeks if it goes through full term. What about the husband? Like, if I want to freeze my eggs, like, whoa, will I even have a womb to house it? Like, there's just so many things to consider. And that has been a little bit of a tizzy because I found out about this BRCA2 positive gene, I think it was like a year and a half or 2 years ago or something. And this year, I've really been going through all of the testing to figure out how to best approach it. And because of the high mortality rate on my father's side, I don't have cancer on my mother's side of my family. It's my father's side, who I just learned about since I was 19. A lot of the women in my direct bloodline, including my grandmother, including her sisters, including my great grandmother, have passed away from breast cancer, ovarian cancer, some related kind of cancer. So I'm taking this very seriously. I take my health very seriously. And these would be proactive preventative surgeries too. And I don't have to immediately do them at 40, but that's what's recommended. Spiritually, this has caused me a lot of stress. And I think I've shared it with you before because I'm like, why am I having to make these decisions? And I can't force, finding the love of my life, soulmate partner. I can't force when we'll get pregnant. I can't force, figuring everything out in 5 small years. It's not a lot of time. But 40 is looming before me. And it feels overwhelming. So, from your spiritual perspective, how do we hold space for both fear and faith when facing something like that?
What I would say is first and foremost, faith has to be foremost, and
Mhm.
it has to impact even the extent to which the science that's been shared with you is telling you something that is quite unnerving.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, yes, yes, indeed, I hear the science. But then I say also, if science is sharing this particular challenge for you, are there things in science, including clinical trials or all sorts of different things, including preventative measures that that you need to focus on and learn about that will impact this 5-year plan? Because I do think these things exist.
Mhm.
And that the pathway that science often offers to us, it doesn't necessarily include the faith part. It doesn't necessarily include a wider vision as to how this pathway that they have come up with can be managed. I think there are things that you can do that you may be already doing, including your spirituality.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of answering your question in both ways, both in scientifically and also with the spirituality. I am one to believe that your relationship with God is paramount. And
Hmm.
if you have that relationship, and if you do things to the spiritualists have a set of principles, and one
Yeah.
of the principles articulates eternal progress open to every human soul. And
Hmm.
so what that means is that, and they also say we have personal responsibility. So those are both connected.
Right.
So in that we have the opportunity, if we so choose, to engender and create and design the pathways of progress, of our spiritual progress in our own lives on a daily basis. And this has to do with even, kindness and compassion and caring and the relationship we have with God, and working and living to the extent possible in a godly way. So I guess what I feel is that, is it possible, even on a daily basis, for us to develop this spiritual progression, this spiritual bandwidth that prepares us for the different situations that happen in our life that are going to be challenges. It's going to come. A good mutual friend, Ivory, of yourself and myself, recently went for surgery in for a gallbladder. Now,
Hmm.
that's a pretty routine surgery. I had it myself, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. So you want to get the surgery so it'll stop. And in the course of him going through the gallbladder surgery, they found cancer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Found cancer. So he's going through this life challenge. He thought he had one thing, which is the simple thing, where you feel these, I don't know if you've know anybody that went through a gallbladder issues, but you
Hmm.
feel like you're having a heart attack, and it
Yeah.
doesn't go away. It just goes
Yeah.
on and on and on. So what I'm answering your question in the way that I think best, that certainly follow the science, but follow the science above and beyond what your particular physician is telling you, because
Yeah.
there may be other things that you can do to prevent this possibility of cancer. But then,
Yeah.
on the other hand, increase your spiritual bandwidth in every way that you can, both in your own spiritual progression, your relationship with God, your relationships with people, hopefully creating people, places, and things around you that are going to hopefully inspire and offer cascading effect to this spiritual progression that I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think so what I like to look at adversity as, because my life has never been easy. It's been incredibly difficult compared to like the average person and my peers. I like to think that the experiences that I'm given are because one of my biggest purposes is to be a storyteller and to shed light on experiences. And it's not always as crazy as it sounds about me per se. So I don't feel that I'm going to be ravaged or devastated physically or personally by cancer, but I do feel that I've been called to shed light on this and to help people become aware of how they can interact with this in their own lives and be a little bit more proactive around their own well-being and their own health. I think that it is calling me to be involved in communities that I otherwise would have not been involved in. And I also think there's a spiritual component to a family history of this particular kind of cancer. And so these cancers are tied to issues of womanhood and femininity and nurturing, if you will. Specifically, breasts are symbolic of nurturing, and literally they give life to children, right? Not only just their own children, but if we go back to chattel slavery again, there was something called wet nurses, and enslaved women were responsible for nursing the children of slave masters and slave owners. And so there's a deep history between the health of Black women, specifically in context of pregnancy, labor, and delivery, and the progression of this country. Like we've literally breastfed America. Right. And so I think there's so many spiritual components of it too. So even just forcing and prompting me to be even more curious about that, not only in a larger context, but in my family context, I think is really important. But I do agree with you. I think that something we shy away from and now in today's society is this conversation around strength. Because let's be honest, people don't want to be stronger. They want a break. They want a chance to be weak. And I think that we have to be willing to continue to grow our strength just as the muscle it is. And how do you build muscle? You have to break it and you have to keep breaking it in order for it to rebuild and repair stronger. And I think the same applies to elements of spirituality.
One more
I,
thing. I know
yeah,
you want to go on, but this is important because I think this is another way to think about how you might circumvent and not only you but
mhm,
your listeners as well. How can they begin to circumvent these different health challenges that they're beset with? And that, of course, is to look at some of the environmental factors that are causing this type of cancer, especially among Black women.
yeah,
The statistics are alarming,
yes, they
especially
are.
especially for the type of cancer that is quite rigorous. It's flying out of my mind right now, but it has a particular name, and unfortunately, the impact towards Black women is higher than it is for other racial groups. So I think we need to look at the extent to which the environment, whatever factors that are pertaining to Black women's experiences. You know, we know that both insurance and class factors doesn't affect the extent to which there's maternal deaths and issues when Black women are pregnant. So
Mhm.
there must be, just the way I think about things, there must be some environmental factors, which it may include racism, sexism, and some other isms that relate to breast cancer among Black women. So I think that that's another avenue, if you so choose, to impact your own experience and the experience of others.
So many
Sorry
choices.
about that.
Also, from a spiritual perspective, there's different elements of your, how would you say, personal makeup that you can glean from looking at your mother's side and your father's side. So the fact that this is on my father's side also is tied to spiritual information that I could easily tap into. But we could have a whole series of podcasts around these things. I need to move us forward because we don't have all day. So I'm going to try to wrap it up for the audience. And again, I just thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. In your book, you talk about love as energy that must circulate. How can listeners keep that energy flowing even when they feel disappointed or unseen?
Mm. Well, I think, again, first and foremost, that alignment with God, that alignment with their spirit friends, their ancestors, their alignment with all of the helpers, healers, and guides that exist in the universe, that has to be first and foremost in our lives. If you're going that path. One of my great teachers, she said, God for her was in nature. So if that's the case, fine. Make that alignment because that has to be first and foremost. That has to be the foundational aspects. It has to be the root of all it, whatever religious or spiritual path that you exercise. Some of my best friends are Muslims, and I admire them because of their closeness with God, with praying several times a day and going to a certain place in the Middle East, which they I asked when they went, I asked,
Oh,
could you
Mecca? Mm-hmm.
pray? Yeah, well, Arafat, the mountain,
Okay. I see.
heard
Yeah,
that. I said, please go say a prayer for me because I do think there's a universal aspect to what I'm talking about. I don't
absolutely.
think that I have or that you have the only path that a higher power exists. I know there are some religions that purport, this is the only way. But you see, I subscribe to this understanding that the spirit, the God that I believe in is infinite in intelligence and infinite in being able to do and perform things that I can't even possibly think of.
I agree with you.
And when you think of this same spirit, this infinite intelligence that has purview over the planets, has to, right?
Hmm.
Because there was nothing, and then this God that I believe in, made everything. So
There was something.
I think first and foremost, have this have this relationship with your higher power, who you subscribe to as your higher power. And if you have that sense, that beautiful sense of that higher power, as well as the extent to which that higher power resides in you, and that higher power, that God force resides in you because that higher power loves you and cares for you so much, and
Hmm.
even gives you grace when you do things that are not too cool, right?
We all do things that are not too cool.
We do.
Some of
We
us more publicly than others, but we all
do.
have our flaws.
I love that chocolate cake, even though it's not good for me. I love it.
And it might not love you.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. So I think that has the maybe when you're hit by the challenge, instead of trying to meet the challenge or fight with it, maybe the first thing is to find the quiet. You mentioned something early in our conversation about the quietness and the stillness, and
Yes.
that's where we hear when our higher power is talking to us. So maybe, you see, I also believe that how this happens with all the billions, at least on the earth plane, and we don't know how many billions in the planet, this infinite intelligence has the wherewithal that we can communicate. We can
Hmm.
we can ask through prayer, through conversation, for
Hmm.
things that we need. So if we believe that, maybe, here's the problem over here. Maybe we have to just take a moment and say, "Hey, spirit, gentle spirit, wonderful spirit, I need your help at this time. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to call. I don't know how to handle this." But you remind us all the time that victory is yours, and that the problems that we have, that you are there with us. So if we believe that little prayer, then whatever is going on here, we're going to handle.
Yeah, it puts me in the mind of I'm sure you know of this beautiful song by Donnie McClurkin, "Stand Still." And it basically talks about when life is just a tornado of things and it is incredibly overwhelming. Sometimes those are the best moments for you to just pause and stop and stand still. And I think for my audience, those in particular with lived child welfare experience, it can be a very ostracizing and strange way to experience life, not having your mother or your father there to support you, not having a traditional family structure, or just a traditional community in general can feel incredibly overwhelming and disempowering. But I think it also primes us to be able to tap into a higher regard than our peers who don't have that experience, because that's sometimes all we have is the voice of God and what is the power that is within us and the ability to pause and stand still in the midst of utter chaos. And trust me, there's no part of being in child welfare that's not chaotic as someone who has to grow up and develop in the midst in the context of that. And so I think that finding whatever ways that makes you feel connected to your higher power, and you mentioned something about like it could be prayer. I would say exploring your five senses, right? Some people are more tactile than others. Some people more in their bodies than others. Find the way that makes you feel the most present and engage with that. And also be curious and give yourself the opportunity to experience new things. Maybe not everyone wants to take a hike through the freaking mountains to get in touch with God, but maybe you like the beach. I love the beach. I don't want to hike so much, but I really, really love being at the beach. Or sometimes it's just about taking a walk outside in the sunshine and connecting back to the earth and nature. Or sometimes it's just having a dog or a cat or a fish in your house that reminds you there's more to you and than just being a human, and there's more to life than just being here and experiencing all these problems that humanity has created. Because where the heck did taxes come from? I don't remember seeing that in any of the religious doctrines that I've studied. So it's just like giving yourself permission to tap in and to be transparent and to be honest and exploring those communities. And also, if you don't feel connected or safe, leaving those communities and being open to exploring and discovering other ones, I think is super important too. I just want to thank you so much for being here. I'm going to ask one final question, but again, we could talk for hours. We do talk for hours sometimes. And you have so much wisdom to share. I'm going to definitely first of all be grounded in gratitude for even being in relationship with you, but also I do ask you so much and so often for wisdom and life advice. So thank you in advance.
Share, you share also because I have come to you in times of need. So I appreciate that we've created a relationship that is has the opportunity for exchange because it's definitely there. You
Yeah.
have so many skills and so many things that I think have yet to be revealed to the
I
world.
I agree with you and I look forward to seeing them manifest because I have no idea who I'm supposed to be when I grow up. But the final question that I have for you today is as you look at your own life and even at mine, what lessons do you believe the ancestors are asking us to embody right now? And I kind of want to contextualize this because this episode is going to air around the holidays, which is a really, really difficult time for those who live child welfare experience, for people who have disenfranchised family structures, non traditional family structures, or no community at all. And so what do you believe the ancestors are asking us to embody right now?
I would say to remember, to reinforce, and to totally believe that above and beyond of what you've been told or what you've been taught or maybe even what you have experienced, that you are perfect, you are loved, you are cherished, you are a reflection of God, and that reflection resides within you. And so I would say, especially when you might feel totally unloved or uncared for. I remember one Christmas, my mother just had no money. She had no money. She Christmas Eve, she went out because we had no tree. And this is why I often forgive her for some of those things that she has done that weren't so nice because I remember this night where she went out and it was snowing and she convinced some man to just give her some kind of a branch that we could use to have a tree. And she came home and we decorated it. And I didn't have presents, nothing,
Mhm.
nothing at all. She didn't have anything.
Mm.
But we somehow made it. We somehow felt the spirit of the holiday, which was bigger than not having the tree or the presents. And so
Mhm.
I think that that's another message.
Mhm.
It's this celebration that we engage in. It's not just about the presents. It's nice to get presents. It's
Mhm.
nice to receive them, but it's not about that. It's about the present that lies inside you that you don't have to give back in a sense. You don't
Mhm.
have to reciprocate to God other than to worship, to love God and to be a God force to the extent to which you can with others. I would say that.
Thank you for sharing that. I have experienced Christmas with no presents. And but what I hear is that you had a mother who cared about you, even though she was imperfect. You have a mother who tried her best, even though again she was imperfect. And you had the village of your siblings and your mother in your household. And for some people, that is so much more than any gifts you could put underneath the tree. And that loving presence, like you said, of being with people who care about you and love you, even though they are very imperfect, is a very important gift that I'm sure fed you and carried you throughout different portions of your life, and that some people wish they had access to.
Yes.
So I honor your mom in her imperfection, and she created who you are today. And I'm grateful for who you are and how you show up in my life and how you are impacting me and in my development as well. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to put in the show notes how people can contact you, how they can buy your book, and they can work with you. And you do readings if people are interested in different kinds of readings. And so we'll put all the information in the show notes if you want to connect with Reverend Lorna J. Hines. So again, thank you so, so much. I truly, truly appreciate you. May this be the first of many conversations that we have publicly to help people reorient back to the God within themselves and connect better to spirit. And to all of you listening, thank you so much for tuning into our final episode of InnerViews for this 2025 season. This year has reminded me that becoming isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about showing up for your own life, even when it doesn't feel good. I've learned that healing is physical, yes, but it's also ancestral, it's emotional, it's spiritual, and it is holy work. Again, thank you, Lorna, for your motherly wisdom, for your light, and for walking beside me in faith and truth. And thank you, cousins, for another season of InnerViews. Remember, no matter what you're walking through, you deserve good things. Keep believing in your becoming. Until next time. The InnerViews podcast is a production of the Safe Camp Audio Network, which is a division of Youth Voices Rising via Fostering Media Connections. Please visit safecampaudio.org on the web or Safe Camp Audio on all major social media. This podcast was produced and mixed by Christine Onjoko. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you consider sharing, subscribing, and or giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcast.